Now, the purpose of a guide coat is to show us any flaws in the paint surface. You can dry sand or wet sand your guide coat, it's completely up to you. I'm going to do a bit of dry sanding in front of you guys so you can see what's going on without the complication of the water. Sanding down paint has a bit of a knack to it. I mean, it's not rocket science. I tend to use a sanding block on the larger, flatter parts. Now, this does have a gentle curve in it. On a curve like this, you could go freehand if you've had a bit of experience. You can use a block as well. You can go like that. Particularly using a block is very good if you've repaired a dent on a curve. So I'm going to use a mixture of freehand sanding, you know, like this, and the block. I will do a bit of wet sanding as well. Now, the idea behind all of this is that as you sand down, you'll start to see flaws in the paint. And you can see that there, how you can see we're taking the top off the paint, and the blue that remains is actually sort of a depression in the paint, just where the paint surface is not flat. Now, as I said, you can wet sand or you can dry sand. That's how top's coming off there. Probably wet sanding is better because it'll keep your sandpaper clear. Dry sanding is maybe not so good, particularly with paint that is not hard. So this has been drying for about 2 days, and it's still quite soft. About 30 days for acrylic to really harden up. Maybe sooner, maybe later, depending on the weather. So you can see what's happening there is that as we sand, the high points are being sanded down and the blue remains in the low points. So we can go in a couple of ways at this point. If you've got a good, reasonably thick build-up of spray putty on there, you can just keep sanding until you've got a reasonably consistent grey, and that's what I tend to do. And then as we progress, little blue bits will show up in the scratches and the dents, and they're the things that we need to look at and start filling, if we get any of those. I do know over on this side there's a couple of things that need to be filled. So I'm going to start sanding, and I won't keep it rolling for that. We'll sort of, as I progress, we'll sort of look and see what we've got as the guide coat comes down and the tank surface starts to show itself. Okay, so what I should add is that I'm using 400 wet and dry. And I'm going to use it wet from this point, because you guys have seen all you need to know. Now, the secret with getting a good paint surface is as you go up in coats and get closer to the finished product, you go to finer paper. So we're on 400 at the moment because we're roughing out. As we progress, we're going to go up to about 1200, depending on on how we progress and what the surface is like. Okay. Well, congratulations, I guess, on sitting through all of that. And I haven't finished, I'm still going. But I've done about 60% of it, enough to give you guys a bit of an idea of what we're about. So, if you have a close look here, you can still see that there's a bit of blue. And that would rub down, I think. But these are the low points. And the high points can be seen because we're down to the original paint here, which was white, if you remember. We're even down to the putty here in a couple of places, in a lot of places, very large percentage. So you can see what we're doing here, but the idea though is that is actually getting quite flat. And by flat I mean that there's no dents or dings or scratches or anything like that. This part here, up here, now that's beautiful. That you can see that is quite a very acceptable part of the tank, that. But regardless, that is, you know, that is really getting there. That is a lot flatter than it was before. Because we've built the paint up and then we've rubbed the whole lot back. You know, so if you understand what I'm saying, we've sort of cut the tops off it so that the highs and lows sort of meld together. We've even hit bare metal in a couple of places, which I'm not a fan of, because when the bare metal's exposed, that's when you get rust. So we have to move fairly quickly on the tank. Lots of bare metal there. Nice. See, all of this, although it's looking patchy and horrible now, what you've got to picture is that you're creating a canvas, and over that canvas you're going to put your paint. So with this guy here, I think if we keep working on him with the block, that'll flatten him out. That there is really because I haven't done much of this side of the tank yet. I've sort of stuck to the areas that you guys can see. I'm going to turn the camera off now though and keep going. I think that time lapse, however long that it you know, breaks down to be, that probably is enough to send you to sleep as it is, and I think you get the idea. You know, using the block on the large, fairly flat surfaces. Unfortunately, this concave surface here, that is pretty much by hand. I'm curious to see how these two little gems here work out. See how we've got very deep dark blue there? So they're quite deep dents. But there's nothing in here so far that can't be filled by more filler. So the idea is to basically knock this flat like that, then come back and then hit it with more primer surfacer and another guide coat, and then knock the second guide coat down like we're doing with this first one, and seeing what we get. Alright, but as I said, I don't want to send you guys to tears in boredom. Even watching on time lapse gets a little bit repetitive after a while, and I think you guys can understand what I'm talking about here. If you're watching this channel, you're probably fairly technically minded, and you can sort of see what we're doing here. So I'll get back to it. I can see at least another half hour of sanding in this, and at some point I'm going to want a coffee, because I love my coffee. And you know, and you really don't need to see me sloping coffee and sanding down tanks. So we'll probably come back in after I've finished, and you can just have a quick look at it, and then we'll throw another coat of primer on it after it's dried. And of course, if there's any filling that needs to be done, and I'm not too sure about these little bits down here, that one sort of does feel like it's going to need filling. This one not so much, but that one definitely. That's a dent. That's a something. But this surface here, when I run my hands over it, it's beautiful and smooth. Even that bit with the bits of blues there, that blue is only 1/1000th of an inch away from being sanded off. So there we go. Back to work. Alright, so this is probably, I don't know, about 90 minutes after I started sanding all up. And this is the degree that I'm going to be happy with. And I am actually quite happy with this tank. I don't feel it needs any filling. There is some filler here, you can see. But that's a good solid repair. You might recall there were some cracks. I've actually sanded past the cracks, and what we have underneath is still good quality stuff. And we did decide that it was going to be a road book, it wasn't going to be a show pony. And bearing in mind that a tank cover is going to go over the top of this anyway, this paint job that we're doing now is more of an emergency paint job. Not so much an emergency, but you know, we need to paint it anyway, else it's just going to rust away, and we don't want that. We want our bike to be enjoyed by future generations. But the tank cover hopefully should hide any evil, and the paint that we're doing here is just in case the tank cover is as bad as people tell me they are. And I have to go back to that and say that there's sort of a sort of mixed feedback on the tank covers. I've had some people tell me they're the best thing ever. They're the ones that generally spend a decent amount on a good fairing kit. Fairing kits are available for them. I know, I have one. And it's like everything else in life, you get what you pay for. I'm actually so happy with the way this has come out. I mean, I am still fiddling with it as I'm talking, but I guess that's my nature. I'm probably more of a perfectionist than I'll let on. I've decided I'm not going to do another guide coat on this because this has come up really good. It's not really obvious on the camera there, but this is really flat and smooth. Those two dings I was worried about, they're actually stone chips. So you can see I've sanded them smoothly back to the bare metal, and they will be completely invisible. But just because I'm not doing another guide coat doesn't mean that you shouldn't if you feel you have to. You'll know you have to because there'll still be a lot of blue paint on it. I mean, I've still got little bits in the corners, but this is all stuff that, these aren't flat surfaces anyway. So when I paint over the top, they're going to look just fine. If you've got dents, then you need to get yourself some body filler. Follow the instructions on the can, smear it on, and then sand it off once it's hardened. It's a bit of a pity that I can't show you that. I do have a respray in the works though that's going to involve pulling dents, cutting rust, welding. That's probably a few months down the track, but if that's something that's of interest to you, then definitely keep an eye out for those videos, and there'll be many of them. But this is the current project. I don't know if you guys know, but I don't. Now I really hate it when the batteries go flat on the camera just as I'm winding up. What I was saying was that I only take on one project at a time, and the reason for that is that if you have more than one project and you become unfocused, and what you end up with is a lot of unfinished projects. And this is, I was well into my 30s before I realised that this was the truth, that if you don't remain focused on what you're doing, then you just never end up doing anything. So anyway, I'm sorry to say I'm going to disappoint. There won't be any filling done on this thing. If you do need to do another guide coat yourself, that's fine. It's exactly as we did here. Every guide coat is the same, but when you start to get to the very fine end of things, say your third guide coat, start thinking about the fact that you need your surfaces smooth, and tend to go for the finer paper so that you're doing less scratching. If you do 3 guide coats on most things and you do the first couple properly, you'll find that fine sandpaper will be all you'll need. But I'm really chuffed with this. I reckon this is going to come up just fine. So the next step here is to let it dry completely, and then I'm going to hit it again with primer surfacer, and then from there we're just going to sand it back without the colour over the top to tell us where the low points are. The object of the next coat will be to provide a nice smooth surface. From there we've got colour matched spray can set. This is only going to be a spray can job, but as I said before, I've got another project coming up that will need the spray gun out, but this is going to be done with aerosol cans and colour matched to the original Honda colour. Alrighty.